When making your color chart, you're going to want to take your strips that you have like this, and you're going to cut them every 1.25 inches so you can make these tests. And the reason why we do that is because it gives you a really good idea of what each one of these colors actually looks like, because it's really hard to tell what it looks like just by looking at the color on this palette like this. And we always just kind of get things going. Plus it gives you an idea of what the intensity of the color is by going from a color that has very little water in it to something that has a lot of water in it. And then here are also examples of different watercolor techniques in terms of how you apply the colors. So when you get done with this part, I'll have a video tutorial on all these, so you can kind of duplicate these yourself. So first off, grab some kind of ruler or yardstick or something, and then you're going to measure off every 1.25 inches. So 0's here, and then 1.25 inches, and then 1.25 plus 1.25 is 2.5. 2.5 plus 1.25 is 3 3/4, and then 1/4 inch plus 1 inch is 5. So it's always 1/4, 1/2, 3/4. It's a whole number again. So again, that's 6.25, 7.5, 8 3/8, 10. So 5, 10, 15. It goes on the line. Once you have all those marked, you're going to get a pair of scissors and get them all cut up like I have right here. Now, you might have some strips that might have some other stuff on the back of here. So I use pieces of paper that aren't real good for this because you don't need them really good for this. You just need to have them so we can do these samples. You're going to take your palette. Now, this one is pretty dirty, which is fine. I'm going to take one of my cups of water, dip some kind of a rag or paper towel in here, and I can go through and I can get this cleaned up pretty good so it's actually usable again. Because this ends up being your tray that you want to start mixing your colors in when you start doing your projects. Okay, so you might use it straight out of the palette here, but a lot of times you're going to want to kind of mix special colors you're going to want, because it's not going to be the color green that you want or the color red that you want or anything like that. So I'm going to kind of do this side quickly. Ideally, whoever had this first or had it before you should have cleaned this off, but that's not always the case, is it? So sorry about that. Okay, that's good enough for now, just for the demonstration. I'm going to take this emerald green right here as my just one to kind of test, so you can kind of see how this works. I'm going to take a pencil or a pen. I'm going to write down emerald green. Now I'm going to take my water again. Get the brush wet, come in here, really work that water into that color, because you want it as intense color as you can get. Then I'll just zoom in here. So if you want a really nice bright green, you know what emerald green looks like. Now, I want to see if I can transition from this intense green down to a lighter green. So I'm going to clean this up. Still have water on the tip here. And then I want to bring this down. Now I'm going to use this rag, and you can, if you have a paper towel or something, because you want to be able to dab off some of this water too. Try to get that pretty clean and give myself just a little bit of a tint of green down below there. And I lost some of my intensity up here. Come back again. Get a lot of pigment. And I think this will be good. Because it kind of gets the point across, in terms of, again, this is straight, medium water, a little bit of water, and then a lot of water to get those really light greens you have here. So I'm just going to clean up these edges a little bit. So you're going to do this with each one of these colors. And once you're all done with it, you have your, let me pull this chart back out again. you're gonna have your sheet of paper, your car or your construction paper, it might be brown, you might have different color, and you're just gonna tape these down along here. And you might even wanna tape them in according to what is on your tray, you know, so you kind of know where the layout is, because the goal is for you to get this back. Like you're gonna give this to me, I'm gonna laminate it for you, so it has this plastic coating, and then you'll have this as a painting 1 student, and then if you get into painting 2, you get to have this back again unless you want to hang on to it yourself. Okay. Hope that makes sense. And I will give a presentation on the next part. Okay, for this first technique is called wet on dry. And what you use for wet on dry is that I'm going to use a pen just so you can see it easily. And we're just going to draw a shape. I'll just draw a heart. Is that wet on dry is for when you want to be very specific in terms of the area that you want to have your color. Okay, so for example, you might be, I don't know, doing a car and you want to keep the background separate as you start coloring in the hood of the car. Let me use probably sap green just because it's right here. So I just want to load up my brush. You can't see it right now, but I'm just taking my brush, going over the colors a lot, so I have a real intense color. And then I go in, and I just be very careful. I go right to that edge. And it's not going to bleed anywhere. It's going to keep it right exactly where it needs to be, right along that line. And again, you would have a thin pencil line. If you look really closely at watercolors, you know, like professional ones, you'll see there's tons of pencil lines in there. Clean my brush out, dry it off. Again, you can't see it, but I'm just swishing my brush in my cup, having a paper towel or a rag or a towel of some sort, and there's my wet on dry. Now, if I feel like this is too much of a color, you know, this right now my brush is clean, I can go in, hold this down, and I can start taking some of that color off. So you do have some erasing ability. I mean, it's paint, so it's not like you can completely get it off, but you can lighten the tones by taking a clean brush and just taking that down a little bit, okay? So that is wet on dry that you'll definitely be using quite a bit. Our next one we're gonna do is gonna be wet on wet. So wet on wet. These are the two most popular or common ways of doing it. Now, cleaning my brush. Now I wanna make sure that my brush is pretty clean. So I actually have a second cup next to me that you can't see that has real clean water in it. So I use 1 cup to clean it off really good, and then I use another one to kind of rinse it. So it's a way to make sure that when I put this on here, I don't have any green. So right now my brush is wet. And you can keep switching between colors. I'm just gonna stay with the sap green just because it's easier and it's quicker. Come in, have my color, and then you can see when you start putting it down, it starts bleeding kind of all over the place. So this might be really good in situations where you might be doing like trees. You're trying to get, you know, like a leaf look on there, or you're trying to do landscapes like sky or water even. To be able to kind of get these different tones that are pretty soft, not hard edged, like our wet on dry, which was super hard on here. You know, this one, as you can see, that when the paper is wet, it has a tendency, it will kind of bleed all over the place, and you kind of get these really cool effects on there, and that's your wet on wet technique. Okay. Our next one we're going to do is going to be tapping the brush, or tap from the brush. Set those off to the side, grab another one here. I'm going to label this one tap from brush. And with this one, again, I still have my green on here. I'm going to get a little more water onto this one. I'm going to take my finger like this and take my brush and just tap down on it. So this is where you might take your, we have a color called Chinese white that maybe you'd have a sky, and you wanted to add some stars to it, you know, that were pretty white. Then you just kind of get this look to it. So I just have my finger across, tap my brush down on there, add a little more water. Or any kind of a texture on an animal, you know, if it was like something that was kind of spotted or freckled. The thing is, like, you know, it goes all over the place. So a lot of times with watercoloring, you're going to end up kind of masking areas. So it kind of prevents that. And you might be just cutting papers to kind of make a stencil. So you can kind of do techniques like that. Set this down. I'm gonna clean my brush in the dirty water. I'm drying it. So putting in the clean water, drying it so it's nice and clean now. I'm gonna grab my marker so I can label this one as Scratch. Now Scratch is I'm gonna start off with just an area. So I'm gonna use the sap green again. I'm gonna just color an area in. And maybe, and this could be a textured area. This could be like a wet on wet area where you'd have different, and maybe I could even throw a couple harder or more intense colors in here. And maybe you want to have lines in there. So we take a paper clip and I'm going to draw kind of by scratching the paper here. Super thin lines. You know, you could probably even use like a mechanical pencil. And what that does is it creates a different kind of a texture, or it might open up, you know, the paper. So then the colors can kind of flood inside of there, get really intense because it's not where it was compressed, but now you kind of open up the paper fibers a little bit and you get these really kind of cool, you know, line-like color or line-like shapes. So Scratch is another one that people have a tendency to use quite a bit. In tissue, you are just going to use a tissue. So I'm going to take my green. I'm going to get some more color again. So it's kind of this laying down this wet first. Little too intense. So I cleaned off the pigment. I took too much off, so I'm going to add some more onto here. And you can imagine this being blue. And then you can take your tissue. I'm going to kind of scrunch it up like that. And then I'm just going to kind of go in, press down, pull back up again. I'm going to kind of scrunch it up a little lighter, because I wanted some more lines into it, although that did a pretty good job with even erasing. I'm going to go back and do that one more time. So it's nice that happened, because you can see that watercoloring can be forgiving. Sometimes people say, well, I don't like doing painting because I feel like I can't erase anything. You can to a degree. Now, here's another attempt. I'm going to put this down a little bit lighter this time. There we go. I got some nicer textures in there. That's fun. So you can think about how that would even look, you know, like if you were doing some clothing, you know, and you were trying to get some textures that might have some hidden folds inside of it, or, you know, if this was blue and it was the sky, and how this could look a lot like the undersides or the top sides of clouds, you know, so it starts becoming a little more semi-transparent, so you have those kind of wispy kind of feels to it. So tissue is another one. Next one is going to be Scumbling. Oh, let me use my pen so you can see it better. I don't know if you can see that or not. So Scumbling is a technique that you use in a lot of other painting media besides watercolor. The trick with this is that you need to have a brush that's pretty dry. So right now I went through, I took this and I had my fabric here, and I was really going back and forth making sure I have that. Next is I just want to kind of carefully dab color onto this. And with Scumbling is you get these textured feels to it. So I'm barely kind of scraping the surface of the paper. So it just kind of picks up that texture. And if you have a brush that's, you know, where the hairdo, you know, the bristles are kind of like, where they're all over the place. Scumbling is also is fun using those brushes because you have those individual hairs on a brush and how they can come in and you can get a different look. So a lot of times, even with, you know, between brushes, you'll get different feels. So scumbling is where, again, I have hardly any water on my brush at all. And then I'm just lightly brushing over top of this so you get that textured feel on that. So that is called scumbling. With sponges, is like you'll have different kinds of sponges that you can use with this one. And again, it comes down to the kind of different textures that you'll end up having with it. So I'll do a little bit with this one on top. And then, or I'll do this one, I should say, on top because it'll be easier to get to it because this is a little bit bigger. But it has all these, you know, weird textures already on this. This is a natural one. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to get the colors wet. So there's a little bit of water sitting inside of there. And then I can go in with my sponge, pick up that color, and then have that kind of effect. A lot of times when people do stenciling, you work on like walls or something, they'll paint more with a sponge versus, you know, a brush. I'm going to take this one, do the same thing. Slightly different feel with that. So each sponge can be a little bit different. Again, if you don't have sponges at your house, that's fine. If you wanted to really have the full set, you know, you can bring, or I'll have a number of these at the school. So you can just make it there if you have to be at home and you can't do it. Salt is one that can be a little weird because it's not one you get an automatic, oh, that's cool, you know, kind of look. You have to wait till this one dries. So I'm laying down some watercolor. And I could fill the whole thing up, but it's not necessary. And then I'm going to grab the salt. So we have this sea salt coarse. Just going to grab a few grains right there. It's more than I need. And that's it. I'm going to put the rest back in there. This one I'm going to let sit off to the side, and I can hopefully show you in a little bit what that looks like. But it'll take probably a good hour for this to dry. And we'll see what that looks like in a little bit. Okay, now that this has dried, we're going to tip this on its side and just kind of knock the salt off of it. And what you end up getting are just kind of these weird texture shapes that are inside of it. It was wet a little bit, so I would wait a day before I would take this off and make sure your hands are really dry so you don't contaminate it. But more than likely, like you would use this in, again, kind of water. So you would like in a brook or in you know, some place that has like rocks in there that you are trying to paint around, but also you want to kind of get these round, just speckly look kind of thing. So it's not like it's going to be white around there anyways. But that's how you do the salt. So this one you do have to wait a little bit to kind of knock it off, and then you'd be done with it. Okay, another one that takes a little time to dry is going to be called masking fluid. So think of a mask, and then I-N-G, and then fluid. With masking fluid, I'm going to draw an eyeball here. Oh, let me use my pen so you can see better. So don't let it be anything special. This is not a special eyeball. And then we have our, the black part of your eye right here. And I'm going to want to have a section in here that I'm going to want to keep white. And let's even add some white on this side and this side. Because there's going to be times that you want to kind of get one of those other effects I've just showed you. However, you're going to want to also protect an area. So that's why we have something called liquid mask, and they spell it differently, so it's probably, I probably didn't spell it right, so this is how you're supposed to spell it. I'm gonna grab a clean brush. I already have this open up. When you open them up, shake them first. It's kind of like a rubbery kind of material, and it does contain a natural latex. So if you are allergic, like really allergic to latex, but I'm going to leave that. You're covering up areas that you want to keep white. Now with this stuff, you also want to clean your brush out right away. You don't want this just sitting. You don't want to put too much on. You don't want to put like not enough. So you really don't want to see the paper. You want to make sure, like, you don't want to see brush strokes, because then it's kind of questionable if you actually have that area covered well. But you also don't want to have a pool of this all over the place either. This is another thing that I would put on and then wait a day, or I mean at least 10-15 minutes for it to dry so you can go to the next part. So I'm going to let this dry and we'll come back to it. Now our masking fluid is all dried up. And when I say dried, it's a little tacky, but I think it will always be tacky because it is kind of like a rubber application. I'm going to get my colors out. I'm going to go in with my let's see, my lamp black, and I'm going to go in. I have a lot of black on here, so I'm going to clean that out, dry my brush, and kind of soak up some of that black, because I don't need all that. There. If I had time, I would let that sit, because now it's kind of like a dark gray, but that's fine. I'm going to go in and let's give this one some blue eyes. Maybe. Kind of bunching up there a little bit. So again, when you do eyes, you always draw the lines, you know, over into it. I might have to put some more black down because it's getting that area pretty, it's making it blue. So I am going into that white area. So I'm touching it and bringing it over, just to kind of emphasize the point of what this stuff actually does. Now, I'm going to dry my brush off, get some straight Thalio again. Try to get some harder edges. I might have to wait till this is dry, because I want to get some stronger edges inside of here. But again, I'm leaving that white. That's super, super important. But if you notice, I do have blue that's over there. So now I'm going to wait again for that watercolor to sit and dry and go to the next step. Okay, on this one, you can see that we're going to go back to the masking fluid part on here. Now the watercolor is dried, the masking fluid is dried. So I'm just going to take my finger and I'm just going to peel off that masking fluid. And it comes off pretty easily. And if you notice, this one has watercolor on it, and then that watercolor comes right off of it. So this is a really nice way that when you do your watercolor project and you want to have an area that you want left alone with no color in whatsoever, that you can keep an area clean. Now the masking fluid is not meant for an area like that's massively large. It's meant to get details in on this part. So if you have an area that you want to keep nice and clean that is large, then you have to rely on that wet on wet technique, or you just got to be able to kind of stay away from it. But the masking fluid is great to use for small areas, and it's just up to you to kind of figure out how you can get how you want to use that in your design. This is another one that is very optional, so it's not something that you have to use. But when students do use it and they are patient with it, it does become a tool that makes your life a little bit easier in your project. Okay, thanks.